Despite our fervent hopes for peace after World War II, it was not to be. 5 short years later, there was the Korean War. Then in the 60s, we began fighting a different kind of war in Vietnam.
For the first 3 years of the Vietnam War, our troops struggled to survive against the sudden violence of jungle guerrilla warfare. Then on January 30th, 1968, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong launched a surprise attack on more than 100 cities and towns in South Vietnam. The Tet Offensive, so called for the Vietnamese Lunar New Year, was so well planned and executed, it marked a turning point in the war. One of the young men who fought in the Tet Offensive was 19-year-old Specialist 4th Class Richard Githens. Soon after Tet, he began marking time until he could go home and meet his newborn daughter, Yvette Michelle.
What happened to Richard Githens would have a lifelong impact on his daughter. Here to share Michelle Bao's story, please welcome the gifted actress and a star of Criminal Minds, A.J. Cook.
I never met my father. I was just 3 months old when he was killed in Vietnam. When I was 5 years old, my mom and stepdad sat me down at the dining room table, brought out a big box of stuff, and told me that my stepdad was not my real dad. For the next 15 years, all I knew about my father was in that box. If I asked any questions, my mom would get too emotional. I felt like half of who I was missing, and there was this big hole inside of me. I felt like a freak. No other kid in town had lost a parent to war. I became the queen of what-ifs. What if my dad hadn't died? Everything would have been different. I turned Richie Githens into a perfect fantasy hero. By the time I turned 19, the age my father had been when he was killed, that big hole was filling up with a lot of fear and anger. I couldn't bear the thought of living the rest of my life never knowing who he was. Then fate intervened in a person of a Vietnam vet named Chuck Gregoire.
To share Chuck Gregoire's story, Gary Sinese.
I met Richie Githens soon after I arrived in Vietnam in 1968. We dug our sleeping and fighting holes together. We swapped stories, we drank and laughed together. We were like brothers. We watched each other's back. In May, all hell broke loose, and we were airlifted onto a beach in the South China Sea. There was a lot of fire going on, shooting, killing all night long. The next morning, we did a sweep of the area. We threw a grenade into a bunker. And afterwards, like always, Richie volunteered to go in and check it out. But he wasn't even into that hole before he was shot and killed by a Viet Cong who'd survived the blast. I've lived that day so many times over the years. Why had he gone into that bunker and not me? Why couldn't I have watched his back? When I returned home, I wanted to call his parents to let them know that Richie was a brave and honorable man, but I worried I might not say the right thing. It took me 20 years to call them. But when I finally did, it was like 1,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders. I thought I could once and for all put Nam and Richie's death behind me. A week later, though, I got a call from a Shelley. It had to be Michelle, Richie's daughter.
That first time, we must have talked for 3 hours. I wanted to know everything, especially the little things. My dad's favorite aftershave lotion, his jokes, how he always stole his favorite sea rations, peaches and pound cake. The more Chuck shared with me, the more Richie Githens wasn't a fantasy anymore. He'd been a real flesh and blood person. The story I loved the most was when Richie received a letter announcing the birth of his new baby girl.
There was Richie going around from foxhole to foxhole, flipping his Zippo lighter so he could show off the picture of his new baby girl. Isn't she the most beautiful girl you've ever saw? I told Michelle about the smile on Richie's face and how I could see that same excited Richie in her smile. Michelle might think that I'm helping her, but it works both ways. How do you put it? She's like medicine, I suppose, for a broken heart. When I came back from Vietnam, I was embarrassed to tell anyone that I'd served. I didn't even talk about it with my own family. But there have been times when you still just sit and cry. Crazy things trigger it, like a smell. Sometimes helicopter blades, sometimes rain. If anybody says they weren't scared, they're lying. Even now, talking about it inside, I'm shaking like a leaf. A few years ago, Michelle asked me if she ever had a chance to go to Vietnam, would I take her there? I said yes, never thinking I'd have to do it. But I don't make promises that I can't keep.
As difficult as it was for Chuck, he understood why I needed to walk in my father's footsteps, to see with my own eyes where he died. When we walked up the path to that village where it happened, I felt like I was crumbling inside. I'd lived with those feelings of loss and grief for so long. They just exploded inside of me. I didn't think I could go on. But I also felt something stronger than fear. My need to be my father's daughter, brave and true to his memory.
We got to the beach where Richie died. I told Michelle how it happened, how I pulled him out of that bunker, how we were carrying him back on a poncho when I made the guys stop for a moment so I could baptize him in his own blood. I put my arms around Michelle and thought again, why did I come home and he didn't? Your daddy was the best, the bravest man I've ever known, I told her.
On that beach, with Chuck holding me, I began to feel my father's spirit in a way I had never felt before. He felt so real, so alive. I wouldn't have been surprised to turn around and see him smiling and laughing. I felt the love of my father and of his friend. My father hadn't died alone. He'd been in the arms of a true brother. I think at that moment, Chuck became my other dad. It wasn't until I was pregnant with my first son that I heard about an organization called Sons and Daughters in Touch for those who had lost a father in Vietnam. To finally find a community of others like me, to know I wasn't alone, well, it was like manna from heaven. On Father's Day, we meet where the spirit of our dads is strongest, at the Vietnam Memorial. It used to be such a painful holiday. Now it's become a day of remembrance and pride.
When you etch the name, it's as if they're becoming live in front of you. I had a really lovely sense that that my dad was appearing to me.
Every 5 years, as we did last year, we observe a special ritual, washing the memorial wall, scrubbing away the residual pain of our loss. A lot of vets come to our weekends, like Chuck. They give us a priceless gift, their memories of our fathers. I know it hurts for them to go back there emotionally, but they do it for us. And they've given us our dads.
Sometimes I think I don't want to keep reliving all this stuff. But being able to share helps us too. We still miss our buddies. We still grieve for all the guys that we saw killed in battle. Richie and the guys were my family. When something happened to one of us, it happened to all of us. The sons and daughters refer to us as uncles. That's the neatest thing. It's just very endearing.
Together we lay roses at the memorial, red for the dead, yellow for the MIAs, and white for the recent casualties of war. Nobody wins in a war. There are only varying degrees of losses, from World War II to Korea to the Vietnam War. More than 200,000 American children have had to grow up without a parent. And today there's almost 4,000 children of a new generation who lost a parent to war in Iraq or Afghanistan. This weekend is truly a celebration of our fathers' lives. Together with our fathers' buddies, our love and their memories, our dads will live on in our hearts forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Haley Westenra.